with no further ado, I want to introduce Ginny Hofmann to you. Ginny has been a discussion leader in the past and a very fine one, and she returns again this year and with this Pickwick Club year to lead us in the discussion of Bleak House. And I asked Ginny to give me a few words of a brief bio so I could introduce her properly. And Ginny's, thank you, Ginny, for sending this to Courtney and to me. And here is what Ginny wrote to me. Celebrating her 50th year as a teacher administrator at Germantown Academy, a pre-K independent educational day school in Fort Washington, Pennsylvania, working in admissions since retiring from full-time work. Ginny is a lifelong Dickens fan since reading David Copperfield in the 7th grade. She's been involved in grad school for the past 5 years, offering other online courses to alums from Germantown Academy, and featuring several Dickens novels. She's been thrilled, she says, and thank you for this, thrilled to find the Santa Cruz Dickens Fellowship. So Ginny, thank you for agreeing to be a leader, and I'm going to turn things over to you at this point.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, if Courtney, if you can help bring up my slides there, I want to get to start with that. And just go to the second slide. Get to the second one. Oop.
Can you see this?
Yep, there we go. Got it. Okay, so as we talked about, we were going to start a little bit with last week because we did not get to Lady Dedlock, but I want to start with this quote because I feel as we move on to chapters 20 to 25, this particular statement from page 256, I think is sort of the essence of this book. There's mysteries and what are the connections? So what connection can there be between the place in Lincolnshire, the house in town, the mercury and powder, and the whereabouts of Joe the outlaw with the broom, who had that distant ray of light upon him when he swept the churchyard step? What connection can there have been between many people in the innumerable histories of the world who from opposite sides of great gulfs have nevertheless been very curiously brought together? And I think as we go on, this is the question we're trying, why are all these people being brought together? How do they connect to one another? And we're going to see a lot of that. If you could go to the next slide. And that's a quote from page 292. It was easy to know that the ceremonious, gouty, gray-haired gentleman, the only other occupant of the great pew, was Sir Leicester Dedlock, and the lady was Lady Dedlock. But why her face should be, in a confused way, like a broken glass to me, in which I saw scraps of old remembrances, and why I should be so fluttered and troubled, for I was still, by having casually met her eyes, I could not think. And this goes on through that section. There's a lot more about this. That's the first question I want to open up. What is the significance of Esther's thoughts about Lady Dedlock? What are we gathering from this chapter where she talks about seeing her in church and meeting her, and also the meeting I wrote gazebo, but I meant the lodge when I wrote that, but the significance of the meeting in the lodge as well. So I'd like to start with that as our first question. What are we learning about Esther and Lady Dedlock? What is the significance of that meeting in the lodge and everything that happened there? So we can go back to discussion mode and pop back to the slides in a bit. Do we have people who want to say something here to talk about those questions? What is the significance of that meeting in the church, first seeing Lady Dedlock for Esther, and also what was the significance of the lodge? Sarah, let's jump in with you. If you could unmute yourself.
So Esther gets those vibes in her body. She feels that something is happening in her inner self just by watching Miss Dedlock. And it brings back memories. She immediately returns to things that happened in her childhood. And then there is the the game between watching her face and seeing. In one way, Miss Dedlock she feels interested in her as much as she's interested in the Dedlock, but she's also very evasive. So she seems to want to look at her, but pretends that, but doesn't want Esther to notice her at the same time. So there is some games there, some uncertainty on Esther's part.
Right. Thank you. Barbara.
Well, we know that she's had this involvement, and we've got lots of little secrets about that running around, right? And you know, we're going to try to make those kinds of connections, I guess. And you know, Lord Dedlock is so amazingly insufferable that you know, as I say, my favorite line is his line about how he looks over his land and says how he loves to see his land enclosed by fences. He's just, and the gout story, and you know, and him where he sits in church and everything. We would like to see him get a little comeuppance, I think. So we can assume that there's something going on there in her other story when she went to the grave of there next to the restaurant, wasn't it? Yes.
Right. She wanted to see where Captain Howden had lived.
Yes, right.
And visited there with Joe, the sweep taking her around, but also, you know, this meeting in the lodge where we have the rainstorm and they all end up in there. Ada,
Yeah.
Esther, Mr. Jarndyce, and also Lady Dedlock and Hortense are all part of what goes on in there. And I think that's a very interesting scene when they come in the lodge, because if you look here on page 296, where she talks about the beating of at my heart came back again. I had never heard the voice, as I had never seen the face, but it affected me in the same strange way. Again, a moment there arose before my mind, innumerable pictures of myself. Lady Dedlock had taken shelter in the lodge before our arrival there, and had come out of the gloom. She stood behind my chair with her hand upon it. I saw with her hand close to my shoulder when I turned my head. I frightened you, she said. You know, I think this is a really significant scene, what happens in the lodge. What do we think, you know, what are we getting from that? What have we learned?
Jonathan, did you have your hand up?
Good afternoon, everybody. Yes, I'm fascinated by that scene, for one, because you just mentioned it, Ginny, the concept of the voice. Sort of, it's almost like a ghost behind them starts joins in the conversation and asks a question. And I forget, Esther or whoever thinks Esther had spoken. And it is a marvelous scene. And just with the voices, is it not dangerous to sit in so exposed a place? Oh no, Esther dear, said Ada quietly. Ada said it to me, but I had not spoken. I in italics. It brings in that supernatural, sort of this sort of, what is going on here? What's the connection?
What are you doing?
Sarah, go ahead. Thank you. Sarah, you need to unmute again.
So I was thinking about the voice. I didn't think about it supernatural, but I thought their voices are very similar. And that's why even Ada responds to Esther when she hears the voice, because the voice comes from behind, and she assumes Esther said it. So the voices are very similar. And this reminded me of an old chapter, I think it was chapter 10, where Mr. Grappy goes to visit them, the Dedlock's estate. And he takes a tour. So the estate itself used to give tours to people and he and a friend come to take a tour of the estate, of the house. And in the tour, they make comments that he's not a typical observer. He doesn't observe the things that usually other tourists observe, but he suddenly sees a picture of Miss Dedlock, and he is like bewildered, completely bewildered. And at the time, chapter 10, I didn't know what to make of it, but now it just fits in. He probably saw how similar she is to Esther. And here is a voice that is very similar to Miss Dedlock. And another thing that happens, so this is the first time. So the first scene, they are kind of far away, so they can look at one another without the other noticing. And here suddenly Miss Dedlock comes, and she's so close. They are just together, all of them. But she still keeps a distance. And when she says goodbye to leave, she says it only to Ada. She doesn't even look at Esther. And she doesn't. So it's very interesting. It's like a game that they're playing. I want to know about you from Miss Dedlock's point of view, but I don't want to expose myself to you, and Esther not being sure because Miss Dedlock's behavior is so unconstant.
Right. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I think, as we move towards chapter 20, if you remember that Guppy went with Jobling to tour Chesney Wold, and that'll come back up in chapter 20 when they meet again. And Guppy, once again, thinking when he had met Esther before, that he'd seen her before, that the face was familiar from seeing the portrait of Lady Dedlock. And so I feel like, Dickens is certainly getting heavier with the breadcrumbs here as to who Esther's mother is.
Yeah.
He's not saying it outright, but everything that occurs in this lodge scene in the church and Esther's thoughts about why she has such a reaction to this woman and why it constantly brings up her early days, when she was young and her aunt, but not quite the same as her aunt, we're getting very close to, what we know to be happening.
And I say one more thing.
Mhm.
Another interesting thing in this hotel during the storm, I think Miss Dedlock talks to Gendice, right? And
Yes.
she talks about her sister. And she tells him, we were estranged. And then she tells, I think, it's very interesting. So she brings up her sister, knowing or not knowing, to us. We don't know if she knows that her sister raised Esther. But it's interesting. There is a reason why she brings up her sister in this context, I think.
Right. She clearly brings up that, Mr. Jarndyce, she knows him and they've had interactions. And
Yeah,
she knows that
yeah.
he knows her sister. They've had dealings before. They have a very courteous conversation, even though they know they're staying with Boythorn, who hates the Dedlocks. He's willing to step up there and have that conversation. So I think a lot was revealed to us through that scene in the lodge about Esther, about Lady Dedlock, about Jarndyce, about how all their lives have intersected at that point. Now, the interesting finale of that chapter, 18, was about Hortense, about the French maid, and when she takes off. What were people thinking about that? I'm looking right at the quote where she said, she went to leave and she didn't put her shoes on and went, and it said, or unless she fancies it's blood, said the woman, she'd as soon walk through that as anything else, I think, when her own's up. That was a really interesting statement. People's thoughts on that? Anybody want to comment on that? Did she soon walk through blood once she's been, as opposed to all the water she was treading through?
We probably have to back up and talk a little bit about who Hortense is and what she's doing in this book.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought we had mentioned Hortense before, being the lady's maid of Lady Dedlock, was her maid who was French, and is suddenly being replaced by the young girl that Lady Dedlock brought in earlier in the story. Barbara, go ahead. You have to unmute, Barbara.
He's adorable, but anyway, at the very least, just that's this comment about her being able to walk through blood rather than water. We know she's perhaps not a very nice person, that she's harboring something. And then in the part that we've read for today, we have her being so obsequious, so amazingly obsequious. And so I think we're set up to know that she's a devious sort.
Sarah, go ahead. You were going to say something?
Yeah. In this section, I was thinking about the next when she comes and asked Esther to be her maid. And she said, I had to quit because I'm high and she's high. And there is a sentence, I don't remember exactly the quote, but it's pride is the enemy of pride. So I think this act that she did, just, I don't need you. I don't need to go with you. Here is my way of going. It was an act of pride.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I mean, Hortense is extremely prideful being French. She thinks she's all that, as well as, Lady Dedlock. So they were sort of headlocking, and then she decided she liked the other younger girl better that had come into her house and is going to make her a maid and let Hortense go. And of course, mentioned coming up, Hortense is going to be involved in a couple things as we go on. I think we probably learn about the walking through blood, that it's not wise to cross Hortense by firing her, that she's going to come back to be causing trouble there. Any other thoughts people have about this section about Lady Dedlock and about Esther and what we've learned about them?
Just
Jonathan?
okay, sorry.
Oh, go ahead, Jonathan.
Yeah, I can't see
Just
every
one quick
hand.
comment about Hortense. In the shooting gallery scene, George mentions that I believe a woman had come in and started shooting lessons, and he makes a comment about her, and I can't find it right now. But when I've read Bleak House a few times, but I said, that's got to be Hortense. And so there's another connection there. And obviously that when you connect firearms with her fiery temper and all that, it's sort of another angle of her.
Yes, definitely.
Comment is that she was pretty good, French woman.
Oh yeah,
Right. French women are a pretty good shot. So
Jenny,
she
if I
definitely
could
could be
just
taking
say,
somebody out.
Jenny, very very quickly, I had six of my family went to GA.
Get out of here.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
and including my grandfather, who was there during World War I. At the city school, the one in the city, of course.
Right. Yeah, we were in Germantown. We're 266 years old this year. So we were back in Germantown. That is so cool.
I went to Penn Charter and CHA. Sorry.
Oh, boo, Penn Charter. They're a big rival.
What connection can there be?
Exactly, between these various people in the world.
Yeah.
They're everywhere.
Who would have thought that there was a connection through Germantown Academy?
Any other thoughts about Lady Dedlock and the meeting in the lodge, any of that? And otherwise I'll move on to chapters 20 through 25 to start.
I have questions that I
Yes. Awesome.
There's this is a novel about secrets.
Mm.
What secret is floating around in the chapters that you have been discussing, the Lady Dedlock chapter in particular, chapter 18? What is the central secret of this novel? And how close are we to having the revelation of the secret?
Right. That's what I was trying to get somebody to say that out loud. Go ahead, Michael.
Hi there. Yeah, and if I have trouble with my Wi-Fi, I'm under a bunch of snow too. So let me know if you can't hear me or if it's not coming through correctly. Am I coming through okay?
Yes, you're fine.
All right, thank you. Yeah, I thought, well, one of the interesting questions was on the bottom of page 297, and I think this is the central, question that we're getting to. Jarndyce says, Miss Summerson really is my ward, meaning really Richard and Ada are wards of the Chancellor, not of Jarndyce. And then Lady Dedlock asks, has Miss Summerson lost both her parents, said my lady. Yes. So after all these memories that we see Esther having, this question of who are her parents. Now, I've read this book years ago, so I don't remember all the details, but certainly, and I'm not going to give anything away, but this he's setting up the clues, and I don't know how far we have to go, which was John's question, I guess, till we find out the secret. But the secret of who's her parents and how is she connected, and she keeps having these memories with her godmother that maybe the voice is similar, maybe the face looks similar. People are mistaking my voice with her voice, so we're getting led, but we're not there yet.
Yeah, definitely. We're heading towards. I mean, it's great heading towards the secret of who are Esther's parents. I mean, that's the number one secret since day one. We haven't known who her parents are, and Dickens is pretty much making it very clear now. David, go ahead. You have something? I see your hand up. You need to unmute as well.
I'm trying to think how to say this without giving anything away. There's a convention in theater going way back to the Elizabethans, and certainly in the Victorian theater. You have recognition scenes where suddenly people realize the connection between them. And there's this belief that with somebody you don't know as a relative, that somehow there's an instinctive feeling of connection. I think the reader, Dickens's reader, would have understood this. I think that's enough to say.
Okay, thank you. Barbara.
Well, and we also know that maids know a lot, right? Maids are in any plot when you've got a butler or a maid. They are privy to all the secrets, and the fact that Hortense is suddenly not the desired maid. That there's questions there too.
Absolutely, Michael.
Mike, you're muted.
Esther's name is something of a clue as well. David was talking about conventions around recognition scenes. There's also a convention around the names of children who were born illegitimately. And Summerson is a classic name for someone who's born out of wedlock. And there are a variety of others in Victorian fiction. Going from Shakespeare, Stand Up for Bastards in King Lear, on down. And so by now it's clear that her name is a pointer toward the fact that she's illegitimate. Who her parents might be, we have yet to uncover.
Lena? Thank you.
Yeah, another secret, which is, as we'll learn related, is why Lady Dedlock acts so weird when when she sees the handwriting. And I think the narrator has been telling us that Lady Dedlock is bored, Lady Dedlock is, sick of this place, she flees to another place, etc. And yet all of a sudden she becomes so animated. And it's so uncharacteristic that it catches the attention of Mr. Tulkinghorn, who will not rest until he finds out why Lady Dedlock has become so animated. So that's another really, I just think that's a remarkably interesting thread to follow amongst all the other secrets.
Yeah, that absolutely. Because I do feel like, she reacts so differently in the lodge than we've seen her react up to that point with anybody. Mary.
I'm perhaps repeating what everybody else has said because I was interrupted and I couldn't listen to the responses. But yeah, I think the big secret is her parentage, who her mother is and who her father is too. And then also, I think there's a question as to what Talkinghorn has over her.
Yeah.
She seems to fear him, and I think he does have some secret that she does not want divulged.
Yes, I think Talkinghorn knows a lot of things that people don't want divulged.
Yeah.
You definitely get a lot of that from Talkinghorn. The whole idea that he knows everybody's secrets, and you want to keep him like he has a special a room in their house when he comes to Chesney Wold. He's always sort of welcome and come in there because people want to keep track of what's going on. Courtney.
I'm just going to pass this over to Jonathan.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Yeah, I
Hey,
don't know why I
Courtney,
don't see his hand going up.
So sorry, I don't know how to do the electronic
Oh,
hand.
okay, that's how I'm missing. All right, good. I thought I was like, why am I not seeing that?
No, sorry. I would just add that, and I haven't figured this out yet, maybe by the summer, but I've always thought that Esther figures out the identity of her mother before before a certain scene that's coming up. I mean, that she's already figured it out. Meeting Mrs. Barnaby, is it Barnaby, the aunt's name? Mrs. Shadbrand, whatever.
Mrs. Rachel.
Miss Rachel, yeah. And seeing her and sort of all that, I think she's figured it out. And it's like not a surprise when things happen later on.
Yeah, I definitely think Dickens is leading us along very carefully, providing clues all along the way as to who both their parents are, without coming out and saying it. And so it's interesting the way he weaves these different storylines together, to reveal clues. And when we have Esther as the narrator, I feel like she's coming to grips with why this woman has such a big effect on her. Why she feels like she's looking in a broken mirror, why she feels agitated whenever she's near her. It's pretty heavy-handed, I think, at the moment that we know. I think we're pretty sure what that one secret is going to be. Anything else about Lady Dedlock and the secret?
Let me
Yeah.
try and pull
Yeah.
some of these thoughts together,
Yeah.
and I'll do it by asking some questions too. In the scene in the church, Esther has not quite realized why Lady Dedlock is staring at her. My question really is, and yes, and we have the illustration, this wonderful illustration, which is actually a good place to start. Let me ask you to identify the people in this illustration. It's one of the most important illustrations in the book. There are lots of things that we could comment on about. Where is Lady Dedlock?
In the box.
In the box. This is Lady Dedlock. Next to her is Sir Leicester. And let's use those terms to refer to them. He's not Lord Dedlock. He's Sir Leicester. And she is not Mrs. Dedlock. She is Lady Dedlock. And she's also referred to frequently in the novel by many people, even people who don't know her, but who know about her, as my lady. And my lady is a general way of referring to an aristocratic lady or a lady of aristocratic connection. So in this illustration, the first thing I would point out is that there's a separate box for Sir Leicester and Lady Dedlock. There's no one else in the box where they're sitting. There are other boxes in the church. What is a box at the church in a Victorian church?
Something that you paid for.
It's something you paid for, and it's something that belongs to people of the upper classes.
Yes.
So Sir Leicester, who's the most important person in the vicinity of Chesney Wold, has a box to himself and his lady. There are other boxes. Notice that they are at a lower level. The box of Sir Leicester and Lady Dedlock are elevated. And the only thing that's higher to them are is the cleric, is the priest who's seated behind them. So they've got the best box in the theater. Oh, excuse me, I shouldn't have said theater, but it is a theatrical setting.
Yes.
I did that deliberately. The other boxes are on the lower right side. They are people of the upper classes who paid for their box or who pay for it by their contributions to the church. And in the box that we see to the right are people we should identify. So who is in the box to the right? Facing us are three people, and then they're all
Ada and Richard and our heroine.
From right to left are Richard, Ada, Esther. And they're two men with their backs to us, and they are...
Boythorn's one of them.
Boythorn is on the right.
Jarndyce.
And Jarndyce is the one on the left. So whom else can we identify?
Tulkinghorn is there.
And there's Hortense is there. I'm just trying to find her.
What's the clue to identify Hortense? Esther tells us that her bonnet is unlike the bonnets of the other women. So Hortense has a different bonnet. Hortense is at the far left, the figure closest to us. This is Hortense.
Okay.
Her bonnet is different from the bonnets of the English women. She's wearing a French style bonnet. And then no one else is identified in this group. But notice the difference between who is seated and who is standing. The populace is standing. The servants are standing. Notice who is lying down. Who is lying down are the effigies of the past aristocrats, probably of the Dedlock family. And if you've been in an English church, you know that those effigies, carved effigies, are often present. Sometimes knights in armor. So what's the drama of this illustration? It's an illustration
of the caste system.
Say again, please.
Of the caste system.
Of the class system. That's one thing.
Also, as somebody noted in the comments, who think the Dedlocks are like in the box in a courtroom, that Lady Dedlock and Sir Leicester are in a box just like they'd appear in court, with everybody sort of maybe taking judgment on them.
That's an interesting observation, because this is a novel about a lawsuit, right?
Exactly. So I thought it was a great pickup.
Yes, an excellent pickup. What is the drama that is enacted in this scene?
Lady Dedlock is looking at Esther. She's locking eyes with Esther.
This is all about vision. It's all about who is looking where. So the drama is taking place between this figure and this figure, who are looking at each other. But there's another drama taking place which has to do with Hortense. So Hortense is also intently staring at Esther. This is a scene of recognition. This is the recognition scene. The secret, we've all known the secret. The secret, it's not a secret that is meant to be kept from us as readers, because we've been thinking all along about the obvious connection between Esther and Lady Dedlock. But what's happening is that Esther is beginning to find out the secret. And the secret is Esther. Esther is the secret. What is her connection to the story? What is her connection to Lady Dedlock? What is her connection going to be, perhaps, to Hortense? So the secret has already been known to us as readers, but other people in the novel are in pursuit of the secret. And the drama is, when will they discover the secret? Who will discover it first? And there are many people in search of that secret. But let me ask this question, and this is a question about Esther. When does Esther realize the secret that she is Lady Dedlock's daughter? Does she realize it in this chapter, chapter 18, called Lady Dedlock, where there's this drama of staring at each other and Esther's confusion and remembrances of her godmother and going back to even her doll? This is the doll story is coming up again in this chapter. And when does Lady Dedlock realize the secret? And when does Talkinghorn realize the secret? But let's focus on Esther first of all. When does Esther realize? Has Esther realized the secret in this chapter?
Well, Dickens has thrown this dust up from the beginning, where in the beginning chapters where she talks about how worthless she is, and she's been told that she would be better off dead than to have been born, and so on and so forth. So, it's the fact that she doesn't want to begin to admit this is, then, what is their relationship? Here's this supposedly highborn lady. We know that she's actually not, but Esther doesn't know that. And who sent her to this place where she was told she was nothing? And what is this relationship?
I think that, John, I think that the recognition happens while they're during the thunderstorm in that building on the grounds. And that there's another element, which is the weather, the thunderbolts, the storm, the dramatic sort of, again, weather event. And then Lady Dedlock sort of starts talking from behind them, the voice. So I think that's when it is.
I would say Pat has her hand up. We've had some people have their hands up. Pat, go ahead.
Sure. Well, this may be incorrect, but I was thinking that when she looked in the mirror and she was thinking about the dolly, that actually she had an inkling then that there was a resemblance that she was recognizing, but either she didn't choose to want to hold on to that resemblance, or or she was afraid to, or I don't know what her motivation might have been in just neglecting to go on with that. So that was my theory.
Thank you, Leslie.
Let me just say one thing in response to Pat, and to add to my question about Esther's, when does Esther learn? This scene in the church is the first time that Esther has seen Lady Dedlock, so far as she knows, the first time in her life that she has seen Lady Dedlock. And the scene in the Keeper's Lodge is the first time that they have been together in the same place, not separated by the distance. Notice the distance here. So,
Okay, Leslie?
I think that she's having somebody said inklings and feelings, and I'm not sure she's quite connected the dots yet. And if you go, I mean, I've just looked ahead to chapter 23, and Esther says, I had a fancy on more than one of these Sundays that what this lady so curiously was to me, I was to her. I mean that I disturbed her thoughts as she influenced mine, though in some different way. But when I stole a glance at her and saw her so composed and distant and unapproachable, I felt this to be a foolish weakness. So it's like she thinks, okay, that's the silly me thing here.
yep.
Indeed, I felt the whole state of my mind in reference to her to be weak and unreasonable. And I remonstrated with myself about it as much as I could. So she's, I think, talking herself out of it.
Yes, yes.
Yes.
As I'll start to answer my own question. Esther is beginning to realize what has been obvious to us as readers for a long time, who her mother is. The father is a more obscure figure, but the mother is crucially important for Esther. But at the same time, she doesn't want to know, because there are problems that could arise. There are knowledge is sometimes a dangerous thing. So Esther both knows and doesn't know, or she knows unconsciously and doesn't want to know consciously. And in this novel, there are so many detectives who are in search of the secret, the connection. And Esther both is and is not one of the detectives. She wants to know who her mother is, but at the same time does not want to know who her mother is. But, and this is a complicated idea that I want to introduce. Esther has known all along who her mother is, because Esther is telling this story in the past tense.
Yeah.
So Esther, who's narrating, knows from the very first pages of this novel, or the first pages of her narration, who her mother is. So there are two Esthers. There's Esther, the character, who knows unconsciously but doesn't know consciously. And there's Esther, the narrator, who knows all the secrets, who knows everything because she's telling this in the past tense. But sometimes, even as she's telling the story, she doesn't want to know. So Esther, the narrator, is a very complicated person. And the drama of telling secrets, revealing secrets, keeping secrets hidden is taking place in the mind of the narrator as well. So that complicates the novel in a way that we have to take into consideration. So I'll stop at that point and let people mull a little bit.
Sarah, go ahead.
That's a very interesting way to look at this, and I became more interested since the last session in the two Esthers, the one who's telling the story and the one who's living the story. And I'm sort of interested in Esther, the narrator's view of her young self. She's a very sympathetic person who has a lot of sympathy for a lot of people. And I think that she looks upon her young self with some sympathy about the complicated situation she's in there, and remembers and narrates this back and forth and back and forth. My mother, not my mother. do I make myself known? Do I not make myself known? How might it like blow up my whole Jarndyce situation here if I do tell, make that connection? And so yeah, that deepens my appreciation of Esther, both as a character and as a narrator, is that she has that distance and she's sort of looking back and thinking, what a complicated situation I was in as a young person trying to make my way in the world.
Okay.
Thank you. David.
One of the things about Esther as a narrator is that she often has something that she is throwing off as an, oh, by the way, frequently at the end of a narrative patch. For example, many of these involve Alan Woodcourt. She is preserving the way things were at the time she's telling about, where she was interested, but she wasn't going to admit it. I want to say also,
yes,
one of the things about this book, C.S. Lewis uses the term secondary world for the world an artist creates. And one of the aspects of this particular secondary world is that everything is connected. There are connections. You don't know. They come out gradually, but it's very small, tight, linked world.
Back to the connections issue.
Exactly. The connections and secrets. I feel like that's a lot of what we're doing. We're almost sort of halfway through, and I'd love to get into chapters 20 to 25 because I feel like there's a lot going on there. So if we could jump ahead now to chapter 20 to talk about Guppy and Jobling and meeting Smallweed, aka Chickweed, and what's going on there. And here we have the slide of course, Mr. Guppy's entertainment. So this is an interesting thing. We've gone away from all this sort of intrigue now back to its summertime, and only the workers are sort of left while everybody's out of the business. And we're introduced to Bart Smallweed, and of course Guppy, who we already know, and Jobling, who we've met before, but is back on the scene. And the three of them get together for lunch. And I have to say, in Dickens' writing, I love the way Jobling talks about eating his food as a matter of growth. That, when he first starts to eat, he's just a baby, and then he's getting older until he finally becomes his human self by the, 15th course he's managed to chow down on Guppy's pay tab. But these three are now plotting, or definitely Guppy is plotting and drawing Jobling into the plot of getting to move into Captain Hawthorne's old apartment to get into No Crook. And he's got plans. I mean, Jobling was on his way sort of out the door, and Guppy's got a plan. And so once again, in connections and secrets, what is Guppy up to, and what is he trying to have happen? There's a lot going on there.
And what about that straw?
What
is that?
What about that straw? That is a heck of a straw. Mary, go ahead. Mary has it.
I think this is Dickens at his absolute best when he creates characters such as Smallweed and Mrs. Smallweed and Judy and what's the name of the son who
Bart and Judy, and then grandpa.
Yeah, it's really great. Okay,
I was gonna say, don't jump ahead to that yet.
I just love it, and the way Judy has to keep propping him up. She has to pick him up and put him back in the chair.
Right. And
It's
grandmom
great.
as well keeps getting knocked over.
Yeah, great writing.
Yes, Audrey.
Hi. I'm new. This is my first meeting, but I think that Guppy recognizes something between, and this is also the first time I've read the book, so I haven't made it past chapter 25. But I think that Guppy is recognizing something between Lady Dedlock and Esther, and I think he's figured it out, or he's on his way to figuring it out. And I think he's trying to get in the middle of it, especially because we've seen him propose to Esther, and he's a pretty sneaky character. So I think that he's either on his way to figuring it out or he already knows it, and he's trying to get in further.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Glenna.
Yeah, I'll second what we just heard, that Guppy is beginning to figure it out. He was struck by Esther's apparent beauty when he first met her, and then when he takes the tour of Chesney Wold, he sees a striking resemblance and so on. He's beginning to put it together. But I also wanted to say, seconding what earlier has been said about the Smallweed family. And when I saw the, I guess it's the BBC production of this wonderful novel, the Smallweed family is depicted so hilariously. And when grandfather says, "Shake me up, Judy, shake me up," it's just wonderful. I mean, this out of an abundance of riches, we already have so many remarkable characters in this novel, and now we get the Smallweed family, and wow, is all I can say.
Exactly. And of course, Guppy too is looking, they think Crook has money, and they're looking to possibly see whether they can, get that money out of Crook, who I don't know why some people just don't rob him anyway, since he's drunk most of the time. They can't even wake him up when they go to get him. But since we're on the Smallweeds, go to the next slide, and we're going to talk a little bit about the Smallweed family and their description. So on neurology.com, which is a leading neurology magazine, they talk about the fact that the Smallweeds suffer from progeria, which is a rare fatal genetic disorder causing children to age rapidly. And in all the descriptions of both Bart Smallweed and the family, they talk about how they were never children, how they were old beyond their years. And so they say, the article actually they wrote in Neurology was about Dickens and his book. Such powers of acute observation and the facility to express them in great detail were also possessed by Charles Dickens in Bleak House. He described the Smallweed family with short stature, preserved intellect, and early aging that might represent progeria. And in the article, as he goes on, he gives quotes of grandfather Smallweed, who also shows features of muscular dystrophy, starting work as a clerk in the scrivener's office at the age of 12. And that is where this lean and anxious character was able to improve his mind. The description of the twin children in the novel, in addition to the likeness to old monkeys and little old men and women, it also shows features of early aging. Judy is described as having a face like a pinched mask, while her twin brother Bart, having missed boyhood like the grandfather, has weazened features, both attesting to early aging. And so they give a detailed description of this, and people who study neurology, if go to the next slide, we can see the little Smallweed family there. Here they were telling us. So Dickens did not tell us if the go back to that one. I'm sorry, go back one. Dickens did not tell us if the Smallweeds were bald. Baldness that develops early should have been noted by Dickens, who usually paid a great deal of attention to the hair of all his characters. All members wore hats and caps, perhaps to hide the baldness, but on this you are left in the dark. In the end, it must be accepted that the Smallweed family is a work of fiction and may be no more than a composite picture, but the power of portrayal being such as to make reality and fiction inseparable, after all, is quintessential Dickens. And this is a neurologist, by the way, writing this article. The whole article is fascinating. Go to the next slide. And then here we can see Charlie and Judy Smallweed and Grandpa and Grandma. And once again, in my opinion, Dickens' ability to bring humor into a situation at this point is hysterical. Just with the whole way the grandfather's legs don't work, and he falls over and throws the pillow at the grandmother every time she talks about money, and she has to be propped up. And of course, Judy who's being torturing Charlie and not being a very nice host for her. So just some thoughts on the Smallweed family and what is going on with the Smallweed family. Once again, more secrets and connections. The Smallweeds connect to Mr. George. They, of course, connect to the law offices because of Bart's, working for Kenjan Carboy. And grandfather seems to have some secrets about money, which grandmother would love to reveal to us. Barbara, go ahead.
Well, Dickens also reveals to us these very telling details. He says that in the Smallweed household, there is no music. And he also says that there are no children's stories. There are no stories running around. And, to us in this modern age, there are some real psychological implications of that sort of upbringing, right? And so I found that a very interesting detail that he.
I think, yeah, thank you. I think part of that too is the fact that they seem old before their time, and so they couldn't relate to other children because they looked like they were aged from when they were little, and they weren't able to make connections with anybody. And the grandparents were the same way, and of course their parents passed away, so they were in a very strange household.
But old people sing. Old people have songs in their head. It's, that's
right. Okay, Jonathan, go ahead.
Thank you very much. I figured it out. Smallweed is one of the many reasons he's fascinating to me is because he represents this. He's an empty suit of clothing, and it anticipates Mr. Dawes and our mutual friend and other characters that sort of there's nothing there. They have to be propped up or shaken or whatever it is, and so this is something that Dickens became fascinated with his essay Meditations at or on Monmouth Street, and that may have been in sketches, I'm not sure, or one of his magazines early on, but that was all about clothing, sort of moving around, and there's famous scenes of the hauntingness or the sort of supernatural idea of a like a dress or something hanging up, and it kind of moves as if someone's inside it. So that's what I enjoy about this. And obviously Smallweed has leverage over George, involving, loans or money and that kind of thing. And he's obviously an evil Scrooge kind of person.
Also, I think too, the connection of the money that he owes is being lent by that certain friend in town whose name begins with a D. So I'm going to assume, maybe I'm wrong, that Sir Lester Dedlock is the person who's lending out the money through Smallweed to Mr. George, and he has to come and make his payment every week and get his pipe when he makes his payment. But there's a lot of talk about that friend in town, and that if Mr. George didn't make his payment, he would for sure foreclose on his shooting gallery and everything that's happening there. Yes, David.
The friend in town. Every novelist of the period who portrays a money lender, the money lender says, "Oh, it's not my money. It's a friend in town who is a man who is merciless." You get this in some scenes in Trollope. You get it in there's another Dickens novel, I'm blanking on it, but the friend in town, I think, is purely fictitious.
He does mention it begins with a D. You don't think there's a tie there, possibly? Just curious myself. I don't know that for a fact one way or the other.
Yes.
It's important to note that the exact phrase is a friend in the city.
Yeah.
And the city is a specific place in London. It's the financial district. So the friend in the city, the person who's lending the money, is in the city. Sir Leicester has two homes, one in London and Chesney Wold in the country. But Sir Leicester is not part of the city, the financial district. So that's, I think, is significant. But the phrase "a friend in the city," which David correctly says is something that appears in other 19th century novels, has another earlier use in Shakespeare. Does anyone recognize it from Shakespeare?
No.
It's from The Merchant of Venice.
Yeah.
And Shylock is the moneylender. Some people have suggested that the Smallweeds are Jewish because they wear a skull cap. Don't have a position on that. I think it's possible, but I think there is some Shylock reference there by talking about the friend in the city. And the person who lends the money always has either a real friend in the city or a pretend friend in the city who is much harsher, much more likely to foreclose the loan instead of renewing it, as Smallweed does with Mr. George.
Michael, thank you, Michael.
Sure. Yeah, I just wanted to also, when I read that, I put it in context with how George was talking about it's hot as hell in the Smallweed house, and he keeps, having little asides to himself about basically telling Smallweed to go to hell, and that the friend beginning with the D is the devil. I didn't really think it was Sir Dedlock, but anyway, that was just my take on it. I thought probably the most important thing that came out of this chapter, just besides how entertaining it was, and George gets to strangle him by lifting him up by the throat. That was pretty good. But really was the discussion about Captain Hawdon and how Smallweed basically, I think, had George meet up with Hawdon, and that's how they started a relationship dealing also with money and secrets, I believe. And I thought that was probably the most interesting thing that came out of that discussion too, that there's a connection there. And that I think George was being paid basically to spy on people. So there's a little hint of that in their discussion as well.
Thank you. That is interesting. I think Hawdon left him without paying him back whatever he owed him. I know he was annoyed about that, the grandfather, that he didn't get his money out of that since he died.
Well, do they actually know that he died? I was trying to find that sentence where they weren't sure what had happened to him.
No, I think Mr. George knows he died, and I think he told him that he had died. I was pretty sure of that. I don't know that I have that sentence right available either, but I thought that was the case, that he knew that. And he was annoyed that he'd left him without paying him back whatever he owed him.
Yeah.
Notice, this is sort of aside from the Smallweeds, but notice that Dickens, we're almost halfway through the novel, and Dickens is still introducing new characters. This novel has so many characters in it, and yet Dickens keeps introducing new ones. And that just reinforces what connection is there.
Right, I think, and we have more, more characters coming. Pat,
more new characters coming. Yes.
I must admit on that note that I went to Wikipedia and I printed out the list of characters because I was getting so confused. But however, I don't recommend it because Wikipedia tells you the whole story. So then if you don't know the ending or the mystery that is to be solved, don't read Wikipedia. But however, the character lists are good.
I was going to say, spoiler alert, they should have at the top of that for the people. If we move to the next slide that I have there is Lincoln's Inn Field, where Talkinghorn lives, and I just thought it'd be interesting to have a shot of that. I didn't really know what that was. And of course, starting that next chapter, talking about the allegory, which was one of the questions I asked people to think about, because they mentioned this allegory quite a bit in the novel. It started out early on page 158. They talked about it with saying, but its roomy staircases, passages, and antechambers still remain, and even its painted ceilings, where allegory in Roman helmet and celestial linen sprawls among the balustrades and pillars, flowers, clouds, and big-legged boys, and makes the headache, as would seem to be allegory's object always, more or less. There are several quotes before we get to the one that starts this particular chapter, where it says, from the ceiling, foreshortened allegory in the person of one impossible Roman upside down points with the arm of Samson, out of joint and an odd one, obtrusively towards the window. And then in another sentence says, allegory looks pretty cool in Lincoln's Inn Fields, although the evening is hot, both for Mr. Tulkinghorn's windows are wide open, and the room is lofty, gusty, and gloomy. So what is the significance, or do we know yet what the significance of the allegory is and why they make so many references to the allegory? I'm hoping, John, you know some of this. It's certainly, there are many, many quotes with it. It goes on to be brought up later, but I feel like the allegory is telling us something.
The allegory is pointing at something.
Yes.
Michael?
Oh, yeah, go ahead, Michael.
Thanks. My take on it is that this is, Bleak House is London. London has a lot of troubles, beginning with its legal system and the way it treats its poor. If you notice, the poor are always helping each other. Joe helps the friends he meets. Liz and Jenny help each other. Charlie helps Joe, but there's no real good system for helping the poor. And then, of course, the whole allegory of the horrible legal system. That's the fog, the constant reference to the fog in the book, and how much the legal system really treads on people's chances at making themselves better, through their inheritance, by taking their inheritance and basically eating it up in costs and fees, and it's corrupt. And I think we'll see more of that with certain characters too, about the depth of the corruption. And so I see, Bleak House is London, and that's the allegory. Just like I think we learned about the old curiosity shop is England, the allegory of England. So that's my take on the allegory messages in the book.
Thank you. Barbara.
Well, kind of one thing, if you look at this picture, and if you've seen Lincoln's Inn, one of the things about this architecture, this building especially, is like a church. We have a lantern in the middle of the back, right? And something similar to a steeple or steeples in the front. And the windows, I can't remember what these things that hold the roof up are called, but that kind of architecture.
Flying buttresses?
Flying buttresses are in the ceiling. This is something else. Anyway, but the buttresses are mentioned in the description of the thing. So to me, there's an irony in having what we are seeing about the law is nothing like church, right? And I think there is even the idea of having lawyers housed together. That whole concept of how the legal system works in England is reflective of the church system in a twisted way.
Thank you. Jonathan.
Yes, thank you, Ginny. Behind me is the actual Lincoln's Inn High Court of Chancery. I just wanted to mention that I took this picture, and it's the old hall from 1490, and that's what Dickens used, the model for the High Court of Chancery. You can sort of see it right around here, and it's not that large. And it was the Chancery Court from 1833 to 1882. And that's when they built the Great Hall, which may be in your picture. And I think that's the case, if I'm not mistaken. The what else was I going to say? Oh yeah, I think that the allegory, the pointing is very interesting, and there's other pointing examples in Bleak House that I can't recall right now. But I think that Tulkinghorn he's under trial. He is under, the legal system is looking down on him. The society is looking down on him and pointing at him, and that he's guilty. And he's part of the, as I think Michael was saying earlier, he's part of the multifaceted problem of legal London.
Thank you. David.
The Inns of Court, which was where you became a lawyer by eating a certain number of dinners there. And they had chambers, which were people sometimes lived in the chamber as well as using it as an office. Some of these buildings went back to the Knights Templar. It's a very interesting circular church in the Temple area.
Yeah.
It was a Crusaders church. That after the Knights Templar were closed down, Philip II of France grabbed their money, then became secularized, but some of them were originally, in fact, churches.
Thank you. Deborah.
Hi, everybody. I've really enjoyed the conversation so far. I want to point out I'm actually a solicitor in England, and so I found your discussion of our court system historically quite interesting and in some respects a little bit flawed. So I just kind of wanted to interject to say that perhaps a better understanding of the legal history of the time might be helpful, which I'm happy to add if that's of any assistance to anybody. But at the time that Bleak House was being written in the 1850s, there was actually a lot of work being done by the government to have a look at what was going on with the law. So in many ways, Bleak House was Dickens' comment upon what was going on within the legal system, because particularly the government was looking at testamentary law, inheritance law, and they were looking to make changes to the existing system that was going on at that point in time. That's all I wanted to interject on.
That's terrific. We appreciate your help with that, Deborah. That's great. If we could just go to the next slide, because speaking of a little bit back of introducing new characters, Mr. Bucket, Inspector Bucket, is based on Charles Frederick Field, who was a friend of Dickens. Field joined the Metropolitan Police in 1829 and moved up through the ranks and retired as chief of the detectives branch in 1852. Dickens wrote an article on duty with Inspector Field in 1851 for Household Words. They were friends, and he definitely, modeled the character of Inspector Bucket on Inspector Field, who he knew. Michael Stern, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I wanted to say one thing about legal history.
Go ahead.
Parliament was at work in trying to reform the system in the 1850s, but it failed miserably. I mean, the case that most scholars think Dickens drew the most on for his vision of Jarndyce and Jarndyce was Jennens versus Jennens. It was a fortune which went to probate in 1798. It was the estate of the richest commoner in England. It was worth about 2.5 million pounds then, which is about 2.5 billion pounds in today's money. The case didn't end until 1915.
Oh my goodness.
Everybody who was born into it had
Yeah, I read a little bit about that as well. Thank you. That was fascinating because it was such a large amount of money. Today's thing to think how they just went. It's one of those things where they go through all the money and there's nothing left by the end.
Well, that was the only one. And so, real reform of inheritance law and of, the whole notion of an equity court didn't really happen until after World War One. So,
Thank you. So mentioning Inspector Bucket, because actually we have Mr. Snagsby and Talkinghorn having a conversation about Joe and about keeping things quiet from Mrs. Snagsby, who needs to know. We'll learn more about her, a little bit more about her later. She needs to know everything. And so they're discussing, and Inspector Bucket appears and says, we've got to go find Joe and talk to Joe. And I feel like suddenly now we're finding more mystery, more connections. What is the connection between Joe, Mr. Snagsby, Tulkinghorn, Mr. Bucket? And they make the journey into Tom's All Alone. And people have mentioned this already, but now we get a pretty good portrait of the poverty in Tom's All Alone. We have people bringing out the dead on, planks from the fever. We have the bricklayers' wives who have lost a baby already and have another baby. And I did think that was an interesting sort of conversation with them, with Mr. Inspector Bucket, about whether or not it was okay for them to wish it was better off for their babies to be dead. So I was just thinking about thoughts you had about how they portrayed poverty in this section, about Bucket going to find Joe and looking for all the various Joes. I love that. It was like sort of a mafia thing. There's Joe the this, Joe the that, and he turned out to be Joe the tough that they were looking for with Mr. Snagsby. So thoughts on that sort of section of what's going on with Tulkinghorn, Bucket, Snagsby, Joe. Michael, do you just still have your hand up, or did you want to add there? Oh, you took it away. Never mind. Go ahead. Thoughts on that? Yes, Michael.
Well, I'll start. The Talkinghorn is motivated by he's heard the story about a woman meeting with Joe, and Joe being paid money for leading a woman to the graveyard. So, they have an interest in learning exactly who this person is. So I thought the whole scene also, I agree with you that the scene in the filthy part of London, the down and out section, very true to what little bit I know about Victorian London at the time. And, it certainly was written in Oliver Twist. Every other word is filth and dirt. And whenever Dickens is writing about where Fagin lives and all that. And so I thought it was very heart-rending. And poor Joe. I mean, I remember when I first read this, that character really struck me. And, as being an abused child that can't really find a home and being told, of course, to move on earlier. Now he's being brought before these gentlemen, and I'm sure he's scared out of his wits to have to testify about, this woman who helped him. But they're trying to get to the bottom of it. And I think you made a reference there to Mrs. Snagsby and how she's, I guess, trying to figure out what her husband is involved in. And I had forgotten about any reference to, Joe maybe being his son. And I can't remember how that resolves, but I thought that was kind of another little interesting twist they're throwing out there that Dickens is throwing out to us.
Right. I love that actually, Mrs. Snagsby, because he's either having an affair, something's going on. He can't be going around without telling her. And I loved when she's like, this kid must be her son. We need to get into this. Glenna, go ahead.
Well, I hate to say that so-and-so is my favorite character because there's so many, but we're really getting this sense of both Bucket and Snagsby as deeply humane, as well as having all kinds of other, they're not saintly per se, but you see this appalling poverty, and you see a certain gentleness from these two characters, and the way Mr. Snagsby keeps sneaking money to Joe, thereby arousing the suspicions of his wife, and Bucket trying to elicit information, but without completely torturing Joe. I think this whole episode is moving and beautifully rendered.
Yes, I think so too. And I did like the fact that Mr. Snagsby wasn't even going to go to identify Joe till they made it clear that no harm would come to him, that he would get money and, nothing else would happen. And then all of a sudden he's like, oh, okay, I'll go look, but it was nice that he thought about that it wasn't just, I got to help Talking Horn no matter what. I don't want any harm to come to Joe. I did think that was great. Um, I was moved by the conversation that they had with the two women about the baby, and saying, maybe they wish the baby would be better off dead, um, and thinking how horrible their lives are. Like they moved, to get in a better situation, and there was nothing, and their husbands were drunk, and what life was ahead for the baby. How were they going to keep that baby on track to be a good person? I mean, Bucket points out, he or she'll look after you when they grow up. And she said, who's to know how they're going to grow up with the way they go? I just thought he did a great job there of sort of portraying the great difference between life for Sir Leicester and Lady Dedlock, as opposed to what it's like in Tom All Alone. Any other thoughts on this chapter with Talking Horn, Bucket? Oh, and then a little bit maybe about Lady Hortense when they bring Joe in, to think about. Now we have Hortense, not Lady Hortense, but Hortense pretending to be Lady Dedlock, wearing the exact same outfit that was hers, but then not having the rings, the face, the voice. Sarah. Yeah, unmute, Sarah.
So the lower class, they describe their situation, but they at least try to improve their situation. They move to a different location, assuming that they'll get more work. And this is in contrast to the allegory about the court and Mr. Tulkinghorn, where he has a lot of locks. The allegory describes the dust, and nothing happens, nothing changes. So it's also beautiful.
Yes, thank you.
A couple of things I would toss into this conversation. Yep. One is a question about Bucket, and there are people who argue the question about whether Bucket is a good guy or a bad guy. I mean, that puts it in very stark and simplistic terms, but it's interesting to me that this discussion emphasizes Bucket's tenderness, his humanity, his concern for Joe. But what is Bucket doing? Who's he working for? What's his role in trying to gather information? For what purpose? Is it for a good purpose? Is it for a bad purpose? Who's his employer? And related to that is a question about Bucket's professional status. Is he a member of the detective police who are just being formed in the Bobbies, named for Sir Robert Poole, the London police? Or is he what we would today call a private detective whose services are for hire? Or is he in some ambiguous relationship between the two? Does he work for the police? Does he work for somebody else in the novel? What are his motives? What is he doing? What is he after? Why does he interview Joe? Why does he interview Hortense? Again, these are mysteries. We know that Bucket is one of the great detectives in literature. Some people have said he's perhaps the greatest detective, along with Sherlock Holmes. But this is early in the development of the detective novel as a genre, and Dickens is right there at the beginning of this form. Bucket is not the only detective in the novel. The novel is full of detectives, as we've already mentioned. And Mrs. Snagsby is a detective. She's trying to find out the secret of her husband, her husband's relationships with Joe, is, you know, and she's one of the great comic characters, minor characters, but comic characters in this novel. We've talked about Guppy as a detective. He's sort of a junior detective. He's got all the information, but he doesn't know how to put it together. And he spends his time going around and sort of stumbling across evidence. He happens to be there when Mrs. Chadban reveals that she was once Mrs. Rachel in Esther and helped in the family of the godmother where Esther Summerson was raised. Guppy happens to take a house tour of Chesney Wold and sees a painting on the wall and recognizes that he's seen that face before. Guppy, he doesn't have a theory of the case. And Talkinghorn is someone who has a theory of the case, but he doesn't have the evidence. And so he wants the evidence because that's what lawyers do, is to try and get evidence that proves the theory of the case that they have. So there are different kinds, comic detectives. Esther is a detective who doesn't want to know the secret or doesn't want to know the whole truth about the secret, doesn't know that she is the secret. So Bucket is involved in this whole game that is Dickens's game with us. Bucket is, some people even argue that Bucket is a figure for the novelist, for an intelligence that stands above the plot and understands the plot, and that he's a figure for Dickens even. So there are many things I think that we can connect with Bucket in the novel.
Barbara.
Two things. Bucket in this, he does not introduce himself. He does not say who or what he is.
How does he enter the novel?
Well, he just pops in, it seems.
He's hiding in the room.
He's hiding in the room. He does a lot of lurking.
Poof!
Talkinghorn brought him in. Talkinghorn brought him to his home.
Yes,
so he must be hired by Talkinghorn.
But he's hiding in the shadows. The
one that I remember. He appears, the narrator tells us, in a ghostly fashion. Poof! Yes. He's suddenly there. You didn't see him before, and he appears magically.
Yes. Just those two things.
Thank you. Jonathan.
Yes, John, the questions you asked about Bucket are absolutely fascinating to me. I never even thought about those before and assumed he was part of, the early Scotland Yard, that kind of thing. And so I'm intrigued. I'm looking at your book, Supposing Bleak House, and you have some wonderful language here. You say that Bucket, as a professional, moves comfortably from one setting to another, sometimes appearing as if out of thin air, like some third person, that is like the narrator of a novel. He is endowed with certain magical and mythical attributes, a potent forefinger that he uses as a probe, a magical stick whose touch is sufficient to make young policemen evaporate. His mental capacities verge on the supernatural. And I think the pointing that he does and how the finger sort of has its own life is absolutely fascinating. And you're reminded, of course, of allegory, the pointing there. I haven't thought through that yet, but thank you for that interesting sort of ideas behind Bucket and how he might be more than you think he is. And anyway, thank you.
Glenna, thank you, John.
Yeah, I mean, Bucket, obviously it's important to know who his employer is, but it seems to me, in a sense, that he's the figure who stands for the pursuit of truth, wherever it may take us, and justice, but tempered by mercy. And I think that makes him a very, very, well, a character with ripples out into the whole, as so many of these characters, the connection, but his character with ripples out into the entire fabric, or don't want to mix metaphors, to the whole lake of this novel. He's setting off a bunch of ripples.
Yeah, definitely. I think, all the things he's investigating, because before this, we finished this section, he's, involved with Gridley as well, pretending to be a physician to serve a peace warrant out. If we look ahead to the sort of the next chapter where Esther is back narrating again, we have a lot of things happening there. They're back from Boythorn. Hortense comes and asks Esther for a job. We mentioned that just a little bit. Richard and Esther discuss his prospects and the fact that now he's also now not wanting to pursue law and looking for a third career of the military. She then escorts Caddy and Prince to tell their various parents of the engagement, with a little more comic release, with certainly Mrs. Jellyby finding she's being thrown out of her house, and while Caddy's trying to tell her about her engagement, and she's too busy worried about her charity. And then the end of that chapter with Charlie turning up for Esther to thankfully get her out of the Smallweed house and have her be Esther's maid. So on one hand, Hortense offers herself, and Esther says, I can't have a maid. And in the end, she ends up with Charlie as a maid. So I think there were certain interesting things in there about Richard and what's happening to Richard. And I think between that and the next chapter, we're learning more about Richard being overwhelmed with his career choices and the money, being obsessed with the case. So I'm just interested on people's thoughts about some of those things that are happening. And of course, the fact that they are going to call off their engagement as well in the next section, that, Mr. Jarndyce asks them to set aside their engagement until he can be more solid in what he does. So some thoughts on that section, or questions you have that you're thinking about.
Is Richard a detective?
Richard's looking for money, that's for sure. I don't know if he's being very detective about it. After looking at those books in Kens and Carboy and not being able to make head nor tail of it, he certainly decides to change careers again.
Yeah.
Any thoughts, people, about, Richard and Ada basically breaking off their engagement and him entering the military?
Good.
Good. Barbara, go ahead.
Well, it's, to me, the interesting part of that scene is that Jarndyce initiates it. It is true that the money has run out, or but Jarndyce is the one that explains to Richard that you're not a very good prospect right now to be a husband, and Richard's mad. I mean, Richard is not pleased with that information. He's and then following the course of this chapter, I mean, before he goes off and into the military, where does he go? To court, to watch another chapter of the court case, and comes out of it with the same old reaction that he always does. Well, it didn't go so well today, but everything will be all right in the future. It's gonna turn out. I mean, he's as Pat said, good, that he's finally getting a little discipline, or be disciplined a little bit.
Yeah, yeah, Barbara, I do. I think that and also when he goes to court, he has to appeal for the money to become a soldier. They have to give money from the estate for him to buy a commission, to move into the military and get that approved. And yet he's still, when they keep saying you don't have very good prospects, oh, but I do, those future prospects. And Jarndyce cannot seem to get him to give up the idea of those future prospects that haven't really worked out for anybody. And certainly as we finish up this section, with poor Gridley, we see how prospects can, ruin your whole life. Sarah.
You're muted, Sarah.
Yeah, I was going to say unmute.
I was fascinated by the way the chapter 24 was structured, because in chapter 24, Van Dyke has to tell that they need to break their agreement. They need to break the romance and go back to become brothers, cousins. But it's done in a very interesting way, because in chapter 24, at some point, he asks them, do you remember the talk that we had? And he refers to the talk on chapter 13, where Esther told him about both of them loving one another and want to be a couple. And he gives them the blessing, but he tells them that it depends on several things. And if they won't happen, they need to break their agreement. And he asks them if they remember this meeting. And when they say, they all say, yeah, of course we remember. Richard and other, of course we remember your kindness. And Van Dyke says, so much easier what I have to say. So he says it's easier, but what we learn later is that he intended for them to remember that he warned them that if Richard won't follow like some consistent path, they'll have to break their relationship. But they don't remember that. They refer just to his kindness. So what he says in chapter 13, he says, if you entertain the supposition that any real success in great or in small, what could can be rested for the base and starts, leave that wrong idea here and leave your cousin Ada here. That's what he tells them originally in chapter 13. And he said if they would have remembered what he told them, it will be much easier to present what he's telling now. But they don't remember. So it's very, very, yeah. And the chapter is structured very, very interesting. And Richard gets upset when Jandai says it's the best thing to do, and he say, why is it the best, sir? Returned Richard. It was not when we opened our hearts to you, but it was. He just doesn't remember it. And it's also, Jandai's reply to that is also very interesting.
Yes. Yeah, it is interesting that, that sort of whole conversation. He says, you're very hard on me, sir. But, he wants him to have a career that will earn him money so he and Ada can be a couple, not just thinking about the inheritance he's never going to get. Jonathan.
I think that I'm thinking back to Great Expectations 2 summers ago, and I think John made this point that Pip was the meal at that family gathering. He was being, it was the cannibalism kind of notion going on. I think that we have that here as well. That Richard, I think, is the meal of the Court of Chancery, and he's falling under its spell. And I think Richard is just going to be, he's going to basically sort of fall apart, and not to bring spoiler in here, but I think that also we're going to meet an important character. Richard hires a lawyer soon in the book, and the lawyer is a vulture, a cannibal. And I think that Richard is just being, he's being eaten alive by different forces. Just throwing it out there. And Harry Stone writes about that in the cannibalism book about Richard as well.
Yeah, that actually I hadn't heard that before, and that is a very interesting way to look at it. But he's certainly allowing himself to fall under the spell of thinking that he's going to have this great inheritance, and he's putting all his eggs in that basket and not willing to move on and do something to advance his life. And that's really driving all of the problems in his relationship with Ada and Mr. Jarndyce, having his east wind come in and all of that. At the end of chapter 24 is we come back to Gridley. who we, Glenna, go ahead. I'll come back to, go ahead, Glenna.
I was just thinking about the reference to Great Expectations. It's interesting how often in a Dickens novel this theme of expectations, I'm thinking not only of Pip and his great expectations, Richard, and he thinks that he's going to be a winner here, but also of Mr. Micawber and David Copperfield, something will turn up. And it's a really interesting theme. We're so often told in self-help literature that you set your mind on something and you can manifest it happening. And Dickens shows us how hollow that can be. Okay.
Yes. I was getting to at the end of chapter 24, where Gridley passes away after Inspector Bucket comes to arrest him, and of course tries to goad him into rallying by saying, come on, give me a fight and everything, with Richard's farewell that ends that chapter. Of all my old associations, of all my old pursuits and hopes, of all the living and the dead world, this one poor and soul alone comes natural to me and I am fit for. There is a tie of many suffering years between us two, and it is the only tie I ever had on earth that Chancery has not broken. And I thought that was a sort of interesting, sort of sad way to end, because I feel like Gridley, like Richard, allowed the poor Chancery case, which ruined his life entirely, to consume him, and which he fought in anger and ended up hiding out, all of that. And yet he dies and nothing is resolved for him. And then Richard is off to join the army and leaving with the death of Gridley. That was an interesting way Dickens chose to end that section.
You think he's talking about Richard?
I thought it was her saying, I thought it was Esther saying, or saying, one living and one dead fell heavier on Richard's departure than the darkness of the darkest night. And through Richard's farewell words, I heard it echoed. And I thought they were Richard's farewell words. Am I right there or not? Jump in. Go ahead.
I thought that that's what comes, the last paragraph, that's what comes into Esther's mind. That what happened between Gridley and Mr. Flight, that he says at the end, the only thing that he escaped, the chances that he escaped, is a relationship that he had with Flight. And she kind of predicts that that's what is going to happen between Richard and Ada. That's how I read this paragraph. She sees the future of Richard, and she thinks at the end, the only connection that will be left for Richard is Ada, is a connection with Ada.
Right, the Chancery hasn't broken, yes. Thank you. Barbara.
Well, Gridley gives up. I mean, he's lost his desire to fight, which is, does Richard ever fight? I mean, he seems to me to just kind of coast. He is not a fighter type person. So I don't know if that comparison is.
When do we first meet Gridley?
Oh, I can't remember.
Back when Captain Howden, when he passes away and they come to the apartment.
Yeah.
He takes care of Charlie's brother and sister, or he's helping them. Isn't that where we first meet him?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yes.
We first meet Gridley in chapter 1 of the novel.
Oh. The man from Shropshire.
He's the man from Shropshire.
That's right.
Who keeps trying to force the Lord Chancellor to pay attention to him, and he never gets recognized, so he's not admitted to court. And he's a fighter at that point. He is somebody who is an opponent of the legal system that grinds people down and never allows their complaints, their suits to be considered. And Jonathan was talking about how Richard is the food that Chancery devours in some sort of cannibalistic way. I think Gridley is someone who gets devoured, worn down. His fight, his energy dissipates, and he gives up and dies.
Yeah, I think he finally runs out of steam. He certainly fights for a while. With only about 15, little less than 15 minutes left here, if we could skip ahead to my last slide to Mr. Chadban improving a tough subject, we could talk about the last chapter there, which I think is fascinating, between Mrs. Snagsby with her so many secrets. Mr. Snagsby with his secrets that start the next chapter on page 406, where he talks about the chariot, that section, but also Dickens criticizing religion in this section. Mr. Chadban holding court over poor Joe to find out what's going on behalf of Mrs. Snagsby. But I think this is a great illustration as well, with Mr. Chadban, Mrs. Rachel, who now is Mrs. Chadban, please don't call me by my other name, Mrs. Snagsby, Joe, and these people that are all part of this, that he's criticizing, religion. And I just wanted that starting paragraph there of where, for Tom all alone and Lincoln's Inn Fields persist in harnessing themselves, a pair of ungovernable coursers, to the chariot of Mr. Snagsby's imagination and Mr. Bucket's drives. The passengers are Joe and Mr. Tulkinghorn, and the complete equipage whirls through the law stationery business at a wild speed all around the clock. Even in the little front kitchen where the family meals are taken, it rattles away at a smoking pace from the dinner table, when Mr. Snagsby pauses in carving the first slice of the leg of mutton baked with potatoes and stares at the kitchen wall. That's a great paragraph. The idea of Bucket and Snagsby drawing the chariot of which Joe and Tulkinghorn are sitting in and being raced along. And at this point, of course, they're all heading to be with Chadban to figure out what's going on. How ironic are a lot of Mr. Chadban's comments, and how poor Joe is being victimized, and Dickens criticizing religion. What are some of your thoughts on this last section of chapter 25? Anybody? John, maybe you know too, while people are maybe thinking about this, Mrs. Snagsby talks about who is Nimrod. When she's always talking with, a little bit more about what you think about that, or what she means by that.
Well, she's thinking about the mysterious person that we know as Nemo, and she confuses names. And so Nemo is part of the mystery. And Mrs. Snagsby and Snagsby are a wonderful comic duo, because Mrs. Snagsby is the suspicious detective who's wrong about everything. She has no evidence, and she has no theory of the case other than her jealousy and suspicions about her husband. She's also entranced with Chadban, because Chadban's religious rhetoric excites her. And this is a kind of joke that Dickens plays in other novels as well, that evangelical religion attracts women, especially because the rhetoric of evangelical Christianity, of the low church as opposed to the high church of England, is a thrilling kind of rhetoric that appeals to women. And Snagsby, the typical rhetorical form that Chadban uses, and Chadban is one of the great comic creations in Dickens. So it's both a critique of this particular brand of Christianity, and a creation of someone who uses language brilliantly to entrance his listeners. And that's something that Dickens is very familiar with himself. He's using language to entrance his readers. So there's a little bit of self-identification even in a character like Chadband. But the rhetorical form that Chadband relies on is the rhetorical question. And he keeps asking questions, and Mr. Snagsby comes up with answers that deflate the rhetoric of Chadband constantly, and that I think are very funny. Mr. Snagsby, I think, is one of the good guys in this novel. But in this illustration, there's another figure who is the figure at the extreme right, and that's Guster. And Guster's role in the novel is something worth paying attention to. Again, a character mentioned before, but who has the potential to turn out to be more important than we might have suspected. So.
Thank you. Pat and then Karen. Pat, go ahead.
Yes, I hopefully I'm not going down a rabbit trail here, but I keep thinking about what you talked about the allegory. So is it possible that the allegory is a comparison between the Church of England, whatever the church is at that time, and the justice system? You know, that Dickens is translating one to the other and the foibles of each one. It's been haunting my brain, and I may be all wrong, but I'll be glad to hear about that too.
Great, thank you. Karen, go ahead.
Does anybody want to respond to that? It's a great issue. No. Okay.
I have to think on that a little bit.
Yeah, that's heavy. I mean, I'd like to think about it too. I hate to pop into another track, but let's not lose track of that for the next discussion. You know, I was rereading Vladimir Nabokov's Lectures on Literature, the chapter on Bleak House, which I loved, and I revisited it, and in that, he points out so much that has to do with this section. He points out how much actual things participate. And in this section alone, we have pictures, we have houses, we even have the carriage of this chapter, how they come alive, they have character, and they're so rich. And I just thought this one sentence applied so much that I had to share it. He says, there are many things, themes, and facets of themes that you should find by yourselves. A book is like a trunk, tightly packed with things. At the customs, an official's hand plunges perfunctorily into it, but he who seeks treasures examines every thread. I mean, isn't that just perfect for what we've done over the last 2 hours? These little threads, the connections, it just seemed like it was the most apropos quote in the world for what we've just done and what we're doing for the remainder of the year with this novel.
That's terrific, Karen. Thank you so much for that. That was an excellent quote. Thinking about pulling all the threads in this, you know, the secrets, the connections, and just trying to explore everything that's there. It's interesting about the high and low religion. I just finished Rachel Ray with the Trollope thing, and there was the same thing, the conflict between being in the Church of England and then these people like Mr. Chadband who have their own little sects that are breakaway, you know, that women are following. They just really have a group of women. None of the men go to hear these people, at least in this particular book. It was all women that follow this other preacher. And how they like to hear themselves talk, but they're not part of the official Church of England. And Chadband, I love the opening of Chadband's thing all about we come in peace, you know, and because peace, what else would we come in? It was such a great, like, blowhard start to a sermon.
If I could play off of Karen's excellent remark, quoting Nabokov about Bleak House. I think, to come back to the question of allegory, I think that Nabokov is talking about allegory, that Bleak House is a trunk, and there are many wonderful things in it, and there are many allegories. There's not just one allegory. There are many allegories. And Bleak House, we haven't really talked about the title of the novel. What is the Bleak House of the novel? It's a specific house. It's a specific place. But it's also the bleak house of England. It's the bleak house of Chancery. It's the bleak house of the class system. There are many allegories in Bleak House, and there are others that we will come back to when we get farther into this wonderful novel.
Any other thoughts or questions before we wrap up here? We're pretty close. I thought this was an interesting section with a lot of interesting things happening, a lot of the connections and the secrets. And I feel like there's still so many more things to be thought about and solved as we go along reading this, that things have just started to be touched on. Inspector Bucket's just getting involved in different things that are happening, and Mrs. Snagsby's just starting to get on her search for making more things occur. And of course, we're still going to learn more about Esther and her thoughts about her parentage. So I'm really looking forward to the next section of chapters to see what more connections we have and what more secrets are possibly answered or revealed.
Ginny, thank you very much for leading us through this excellent discussion. There's more to come. Stay tuned for next month's continuation of our discussions of Bleak House. So thank you again, Ginny.